Steven Soderbergh returns to the crime thriller department with his latest, an HBO Max original called No Sudden Move. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and welcome to my spoiler-free review for the new HBO Max original film, No Sudden Move, directed by Steven Soderbergh, making a return to the crime thriller drama department. He, of course, famous for Ocean's 11 and many other films from that era, but most recently, Logan Lucky, another great crime thriller film. And of course, these movies are always very star-studded. So before we get to the review, I do want to welcome you to Dan Reviews It. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing or commenting below or liking this video. Just that simple task does help out the channel, so I appreciate it. Let's get to this film. It is streaming on HBO Max, like I've said, and this is one that was always destined for HBO Max. A lot of these big name movies now in the last 6-9 months were designated for theaters and then just sort of bought by one of the streamers. But no, this was always designated for HBO Max, and certainly one of their higher profile original movies yet. But this boasts a cast of plenty. Like I said, most of these Steven Soderbergh films of the crime nature do have a very impressive cast, and this is no different. Don Cheadle heads up the cast, but you've also got Benicio del Toro, David Harbour from Stranger Things, Matt Damon, John Hamm, Kieran Culkin, Ray Liotta, Brendan Fraser is even in this, so, a little bit of everybody here. So it takes place in the mid-50s in Detroit, and this is a group of small-time criminals who are hired by they do not know whom. They have some thoughts and maybe some bad blood around town with some people, but they don't know for sure who has hired them. But they're hired to steal what they think is a fairly simple document, and as they sort of go further down the rabbit hole and their plan keeps going awry, they realize, that they've maybe bit off more than they can chew. And that is the basis of the story. Don Cheadle's sort of the first one we meet right out of the gate, and he does end up being basically the star of the film. Also, child actor Noah Jupe, who I've mentioned several times. He's the boy in A Quiet Place. So I just mentioned that recently with Quiet Place Part 2, but he was in Ford v Ferrari and all of these really high-profile movies, and he is a really good young actor. He is growing, though. He has got to be at least 15 or 16 by now, and so even in his I don't want to say older years, but he's not a little kid anymore, and sometimes that can be a tricky transition, but he's great here as well, playing David Harbour's son. So Steven Soderbergh, I have not seen all of his movies, that's for sure, and I do think he is a bit hit or miss with the ones I have seen. Even his Meryl Streep dramas are a bit hit or miss, because The Laundromat was horrible, but then Let Them All Talk last year, which was another HBO Max original, was in my top 10 or 15 for the year. I really enjoyed that movie. So there you go. But Steven Soderbergh's, I think, bread and butter really are these crime thriller drama films. And I've already mentioned a couple that you may know. If you've not seen Logan Lucky, by the way, with Daniel Craig, that came out maybe 2017. Very, very good movie. And this one is another pretty solid one. It's got a fairly tight script. Now, it does sort of, the script kind of unravels as these characters' lives are also unraveling, because it gets more convoluted and sort of buried under its own weight in places and becomes a little confusing. But the performances are so strong that you sort of barely notice, because you're so riveted by the performances of the characters. I will say that it seems like Soderbergh maybe could have leaned a little more into some of the things that are just on the surface. We are in the mid-50s in Detroit, and Don Cheadle is black. There's definitely a lot of racial tension that could have been played up and wasn't. And I sort of, in one way, I actually really appreciate that, because we've had so many very racially tense movies in the last year or two, with Small Axe and the Chicago 7, a lot of these things that have taken place, not quite in the 50s, but close, close by in the 60s and early 70s. So Look, to be maybe a little more authentic to the time period, he could have leaned into some of that, but I also kind of appreciate that he didn't and sort of let the characters find their own way without being an overly preachy film. So I think at the end of the day, I like that he didn't really lean into that too much. However, it does make me wonder, okay, well, could there have been more in the script that was a little meatier than just your typical Steven Soderbergh heist type movie? And with that, look, these other movies were a lot of fun. Logan Lucky, Ocean's 11. This one is not nearly as much fun. It does have a couple of lighter moments, but for the most part, I would say this is a heavier drama than either of those. So I would say, kind of buckle up for not necessarily your typical Steven Soderbergh crime thriller. It's definitely a little bit darker than some of those other films. But look, he worked with Don Cheadle all the way back from Ocean's 11. And Cheadle needs very little directing, I feel like, anyway. He is really a pro, and I always enjoy seeing him on screen. But this whole cast really plays well off each other. David Harbour, thankfully, is finally kind of coming up in the world with Stranger Things because he's been a character actor for decades, always kind of popping up. He's really good here as well. Sadly, the weak link in the cast for me was Benicio del Toro, and I don't know why. Usually he's really on his kind of A game. He was the only one I could say I felt was maybe phoning it in a little bit, but it's a very tight movie. Pay attention though, because like I said, it does get sort of lost in its own story sometimes with what these characters are going through. But I'm all for welcoming Steven Soderbergh back. I really, he is becoming, and look, Magic Mike is one of my guilty pleasure movies. When I first saw it, I was like, that's okay. I've seen it, I think I counted 9 times. I watched it again like 2 weeks ago, and I think that was my 9th time through. I love Magic Mike, and that's not your typical Soderbergh either, but it does have some of those same sort of tropes of you don't expect it to necessarily be dark, but it does sort of go in those places too. So a little bit of a mixed bag sometimes, Steven Soderbergh, but for the most part, when his movies are on, they really, really are solid. And he knows always how to get great performances. So overall, I think I'm going to give. I always forget the name of this movie, by the way. It's No Sudden Move. I don't know why I can't remember the title. It's sort of generic, I guess, but No Sudden Move. I'm going to leave it with a B plus. All right, well that will do it. Thank you for watching. A lot of movies, by the way, really coming out. Theaters are open again. It's summer movie season, so in the next 2 weeks or so, I'm going to have reviews for F9, the Black Widow movie. I'm going to do a whole sort of video of like 3 or 4 of the recent kids movies, The Boss Baby and Peter Rabbit 2 and what else? Spirit. The Spirit sequel. So I have a lot of movies coming, or a lot of reviews coming up, I should say, for some of the hot movies that are out right now. So keep those in mind. But thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.